this morning and I was like, I need just nutrients.
Yeah.
That's what people gonna see.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Come look, James. It's lovely.
I'm gonna test the sound. I'm gonna open the link
Okay.
over there.
Yeah.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah, it's simple.
The light looks
One
good.
cable.
Let's see what it's like.
Now we got this shirt. Obviously, it's
I-
white.
Oh, yeah. Hello. Hi, everyone. Good job.
Perfect.
Simple. Let's see if it works.
Thank you, Filippo.
Let's see if it
I wanna
works.
see the sound.
Okay.
How do we test it?
test it?
Should I go outside and
I'm
open the
gonna-
stream? Oh, you're.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. And then I'll go get a couple of bottles of water.
Are you going down to get those?
Yeah,
Can you grab my index cards from your desk?
I totally can do that. And then just so you know, Will is gonna come and relieve me around 2 because I need to go pick up the penny purries. So I have to be in 17 places at once. So sadly, I won't be here for the Clint and Taya, but I'll probably listen in my headphones as I walk.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And then I'm here today. I've booked out until 4 if anyone wants to do the affinity hour.
Amazing. And I think it's fine to go down in the courtyard unless they're
Well,
doing
apparently not, because
Oh, no?
I was sitting there with our coffees for like 2 minutes, and
Yeah.
they were like, some company's filming today.
Oh, okay. So just kidding.
I think it works very well.
It sounds good. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, stay here.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. You want to talk?
No. Oh, I can talk by myself. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
you
can
got
make a
very
monologue. I thought you were giving some company, but I can still be able to make a monologue. So thank you. Welcome to Global Forum. I'm gonna do my fingernails now, if you don't mind. I use my Leatherman. I take my knife out, and then I do some cleaning because that's nice. And we don't have to.
Thank
Yes.
you, Filippo.
Also, those things that do like alter AI, I have my own questions about it too.
I mean, If I only think last year, you were here last year, for the streaming, what the hell of issues and problems and going back and cable missing and people were late. I mean, it was the whole stuff. Look how simple it is.
I know.
YouTube, it works. I mean, it can be better. We can add a proper camera. We can add the proper microphones.
Well, and I was saying to James, like, I think the next step too is figuring out the closed captioning, which I think we have to do a special thing to get that to work.
Yeah.
But otherwise,
Yeah, it looks great. Sounds great.
I mean, you can use another computer if you want moderate answer to possibly.
in the chat
In
or
the
whatever. Right.
Oh, like an interact, like they can interact.
Or we enable that or disable that, and people.
I mean,
I will defer to you guys. I don't know if that's too much for today. It's up to you.
I think people are welcome to chat with each other. I don't know. We might make it clear that there's not a Rattlestick person in the chat. I don't know if we can have a consistent Rattlestick person in the chat. That's what I'm saying.
And for the panels, I prepare a microphone, but it depends how many people we are. I mean, we don't really need a mic here. It's so small.
Yeah.
How's this hang up looking stuff pretty
Oh,
right?
actually, I don't know. Let me look.
Unless you're about to do something, I don't know.
I think Will said everyone, you were there yesterday, but Will said everyone got kind of excited about
Okay.
some of them when he announced it.
Yeah. There was lots of like mutterings and but it is also a really sunny Saturday in June.
Yeah.
So I hope people remember there isn't us.
Okay, 24. So that's about 10 more than we had yesterday.
Perfect. So even if that's 10 or 12, like, you know what I mean, that's great.
100%.
I think some people come back after yesterday.
After the show?
The show went very well, okay.
Yeah, oh my god.
This is what I heard.
Like, we were talking about this, everyone like jumped out their seats at
Right.
the end, like, big energy.
Right.
And then how many do we have for tonight? 65.
For the show?
Yeah, 65.
That would be okay.
Okay. Is there a way that we can pause, or we can pause this? Or...
I mean, we go live in what, in 20 minutes?
Yeah. We already put all the info in, so I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe we just let it go.
Just let it go. No.
Yes, amazing.
I love that Tea Alagic too.
I look at it in every
universe.
universe, in every way. We need to get her a new job. She needs to leave the new school. I
Do you
get it.
hate that everyone made the news? I really don't know any lore.
The lore is all institution stuff eventually, but so when I was there,
Did you do a master's there? Or
masters, in directing, which they don't have anymore. Tay was like, they don't even teach a directing class. I'm like, then what are you doing there? Like, what are you teaching them? But essentially, when I was there, there was a head of the directing department, and so the whole MFA program was run by Sarah Jessica Kirk put in this way to start undergrad BFA, and that happened right when I got there. So there was like all this backwards. So the MFA got in a lot of ways, so they deprioritized.
And you just feel an institution something you can you're like, no one cares about us.
Well, I know some crazy stuff happened in the head of the directing department. We lived in the middle of my second year. Taya, who was there to teach contemporary script analysis, essentially. And then another professor, Stephen Brown-Freed, who was teaching Shakespeare class at the time, they stepped up and became co-heads of the department together, sort of in an interim capacity.
Oh, yeah.
And then they were interim until I graduated. And so they essentially, the two of them were like my main teachers. I mean, really Taya, because I'm just really not a Shakespeare gal, which is fine.
That is absolutely fine.
You know, I just, the way my brain works. But, so they, but then I guess after I left a couple of years later, like, so Stephen moved up to be like, a more administrative person.
Oh. Is that a thing?
Anyway, and whatever, anyway, long story short, Stephen moved out of the drama school and into the performing arts place. Taya has just been like stuck there, but they got rid of the directing MFA, and they got rid of individual tracks, and now you can just get this sort of like
Theater
making degree where you like don't actually do anything real, like you just like collaborate.
It helps just as much as
Costs,
of the real MFA did.
so much money, and I'm telling you, I can't even listen to my students do it. Hey, Rose.
Sorry. Oh, I love your.
Oh,
yes.
I'm James and Matthew's birthday.
I know I'm literally massive.
Anyway, because they're not getting the education.
Yeah, they literally don't know how to.
Yay! We got our streaming set up. So
I saw
great.
that, yeah.
I mean, Rose, I saw that we got bumped up to about 24 on this RSP list, so who knows, but.
So we heard like that means 12. Probably.
Yeah, like the attrition rate is about 50% maybe.
Yeah, I'm wondering, anyway, because, yeah, I guess it's gonna be it. I'll try and think of a way we could push the live stream this last minute.
Yeah, we've got Carrie putting it on socials,
Right.
but that's really the only thing you can do, like at this point. But I don't know, maybe encourage people to sit close because we're not going to be mic'd.
Yeah.
Again, will you intro the lawyer panel?
Happy to intro whatever. Yes, except for I can't intro the end because I have to go to the end.
Yes, I can self-intro, and it might be nice for Will to intro the caps, like Clint's, like,
Oh,
you
that's
know,
actually
anyway,
way better.
if that
Yeah,
feels
yeah,
cheap,
that's
if we each want to do one.
For sure.
Are we starting anything with this, or?
No. Yeah, we're serving information.
Yes.
Wow.
If they want wine, they have to come back
Consider my
tomorrow.
appetite fulfilled. Okay.
Okay, so right now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab some water bottles and I'm gonna go get your note cards.
Do you need hands from any of us for that?
No, I'm okay. I'm gonna throw my stuff in the office, etc. And then, yeah, if you just see anybody coming in interested to intercept them,
They're allowed to be in.
certainly.
Like the house is
Yes,
open.
I would just say to the panelists, I said maybe try and arrive around 11:45.
So who's on this one? The lawyers?
This is April and Kevin, the lawyers, and Mel is moderating.
Mel's lawyers.
Yeah, so Mel should be here.
So for Georgia, do you want me up here or downstairs?
I don't know what makes sense.
We can just do this thing as always.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, yeah.
When people coming know this thing. Like, you know what I mean? If you know about the global forms panels, I'm guessing you might have some to know, but.
The only thing is that, Sage, what's your role in all this? What do you do?
I don't know.
I was actually like, oh, you go ahead.
Oh, I was thinking I would just go to the office and finish programs, but
I want you to watch if you want to watch any of this. If you don't want to watch some of it, then certainly there are tasks.
If you can spare, half an hour of your time.
Yeah.
It's actually really nice to have you greeting folks as they come in.
Oh,
And
great.
you can approach towards me box office.
What did you say?
Just direct them
Direct
towards me,
towards
like,
you.
yeah, welcome to Rattlestick, you checking over your box office.
Oh, great, sure, can do that.
That's, okay, yes, perfect. Okay, a team. Yes. And then, yeah, I would say if there is something that you're not necessarily interested in watching, feel free to do the printing and stuff. If not, we can always do it for
In between 3 and 7 are the districts. Shall I go home?
if you want to. I'll just be packing it over. So, it's entirely up to you.
How did it go?
Hello, welcome.
Right
Yes.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah, you're gonna see tonight, right?
Thank you so much
Yes.
for coming. This is
I think my roommate and friend enrolled everything.
Oh, yay, okay, awesome. Hi.
Hi.
Oh, nice to meet you, I'm Kate.
Great.
Thank you so much for coming. Hi. Oh, welcome to. Thank you for being here.
Our pleasure. I don't know how many people are gonna say, yeah, it's too nice out, I'm gonna go.
We were just
I
saying
know,
that as well.
It was such a beautiful day.
Oh my gosh, like never has been.
I know.
I know it's like just starting to
We
get
do have
weather.
our little streaming setup, so maybe some people will log in.
We'll sit in Prospect Park and watch. the
Yeah,
game.
exactly.
And Mel speaking with you folks.
Yes,
and
I believe so.
moderating.
Yeah.
Good. And then we were curious if you were thinking of a sort of participatory Q&A at the end, or if you'd
Sure.
rather just kind of have Mel lead you folks through.
It's, we're completely flexible, we've done it all.
Cool.
Like, whatever works for you guys, works for us.
Yeah.
So the last question in that space is for the Q&A, would you like the record students always, or?
Doesn't matter
I
to me.
I always assume everyone's wearing white, so.
Great. I love it.
We're not gonna say anything.
That is a good.
Yeah.
No problem.
We're gonna start our comments off with, kind of a legal disclaimer, all lawyers have
Oh,
to
yeah.
say,
Great.
this is
Yeah.
not personalized legal advice.
I love it. Okay.
Fantastic.
That's so amazing. So
Wonderful.
That comes green, and you have hit that.
Great. So when we're
That should be on that repro.
Where you would like us to sit. I would like them to both sit there, I guess.
Stage.
I know with the lights are very bright.
Do you want me to take them down?
Yeah.
Yeah. Please.
Get still water right there.
Yes. Put this in.
Okay, excited to get started. Thank you all for coming. This is the Global Forms panel series for this year's Global Forms, and we're so excited that you're kicking it off today. These are the wonderful folks from Dyer Harris, and I'll let you just sort of go down the line and introduce yourselves, but just want to thank you so much for being here and for sharing this information. We're really, really happy to be able to provide a space to talk about this process. So appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I'm April Harris. Excuse me, my voice is not used to this kind of thing. I'm a lawyer. This is my partner, Kevin Dyer. We are Dyer Harris, and we do a lot of O1 petitions. We do a lot of immigration petitions for all kinds of people in the arts. It is our mission and joy to work with international artists. And we are so honored to be here. We're honored to be here with Mel, who we just were discussing the fact that we've worked together for 7 years. These are, you'll see as you go through this that your relationship with your lawyer is an important personal bond. I know for me, it really matters tremendously. I live for our work. So anyway, that's me. I'm April.
Needless to say, I'm Kevin Dyer, and I'm a part of that team. April's the head of our O1 team. I do primarily other forms of visas that frequently touch on the arts as well, whether it's investor visas or visas of other categories. Okay.
Great. Hi, I'm Mel. I'm a costume designer and an O1 visa holder, and I've worked with April and Kevin on 3 petitions now for my O1, and then I'm also curator for this festival, and just thought it would be great to have them come and share their knowledge with us. And I'm very grateful that they're so generously donating their time. It really is incredible, very kind. And I'm going to talk a little bit about me and my experience as an O1 artist. And then I have some questions that I'll be asking them, and then we'll open it up to questions.
And before we go forward, I do want to make our required legal disclaimer. Anything that Kevin and I say today, please don't consider it personalized legal advice. This is more just information, getting you comfortable with this whole world. This does not establish an attorney-client relationship. There are a lot of rules relating to how lawyers interact with members of the public. So I just have to kind of make this. So anyway, sorry for that.
No, absolutely. I think that's also like a really good example, actually. I was going to say that I really am hoping that this can be a resource to people in this room, but also for people who see the video, who are applying, because I think that the O1 can be a pretty mysterious and stressful process. And what I have found most helpful in my experience working with them is that as lawyers, they're like willing to really talk me through it. and it's I have other friends who are lawyers who have told me like, your lawyers are very nice. Like, your lawyers are very nice. Most lawyers are not so patient, and they're just kind of like, what do you mean you don't know what this means? Just, you know. So but because I do think that is part of it, is like, as artists, we're not as adept sometimes in these technical terms and legalese, and it can be very overwhelming. And so I think what can be helpful is finding people, finding lawyers, if that's the route you go, that really help you through it. So yeah, so that said.
It should not be stressful. It's crazy that we put international artists through this insane, what is it, the 12 labors of Hercules?
Yeah.
Honestly, next is going to be walking on hot coals. It should not be this disastrous experience from which people have to recover for 6 months. Yeah. But it is.
It is.
It is.
It is. It
And
is.
I hate that. But
it is. It's a stressful experience. So I think the more that we can talk about it and the more we can share information, like, just, you know, hopefully the easier it's going to be for people. So yeah, a little bit about my journey. I'm from Singapore, and I have been in the US since, for a long time now. But officially on the O1 for the last 7 years. I applied for my O1 after I finished my MFA in costume design at UC San Diego. And then did a year of OPT, and then applied for the O1. And then since then have renewed it twice. And I think it's very interesting to think about. I never would have thought that I would have that much experience in this now from when I first did it. But it's a little bit like when we were putting together this panel and stuff, I was like, I'm kind of seasoned actually now.
really are.
So I feel like I can share some things. I think I'm trying to think of how I met you. I think it was another designer that might have given me your information.
In Chicago?
Maybe in Chicago.
So.
And then we eventually met in New York and worked together. And yeah, I'll sort of like sprinkle a little bit more of that info as we get into our questions. But I think the process, it is really stressful at the beginning, but I think each time I've done it, I've come to understand it more. And it's become a little less mysterious, which has been helpful. So yeah, I'm gonna dive into the questions.
Okay, I had a thought while you were talking. I'm not sure I can remember what it was. Okay, go on.
Okay, I'm sure it'll come back. Okay, so my first question, which is just sort of to give us an overview, like, what is the O1 visa? Who is eligible for it? Yeah.
Go for it.
I'll take it.
Go for it. April.
The O1 is a non-immigrant visa, of which there are many. It's like an alphabet soup of visas. You'll probably have friends with H-1Bs. You may be on a student visa. There are several different kinds of student visas. O1 is just one of probably 20 different non-immigrant visas. Why I say non-immigrant visas is because there's immigrant visas too. Immigrant visas are normally called green cards. So everything's a visa. And the O1 is a very fantastic special visa because it really caters to the needs of traditionally self-employed artists, meaning people that don't have jobs. Or if they have jobs, they have so many jobs, it's really hard to think of anything as a job. So it's a great way for people in the arts who tend to work and, with collaborate with this theater and then collaborate with that designer and move. In any given year, you may have 10 or 5 or 20 different kinds of collaborations. And the O1 is really designed to embrace that, which is just fantastic. Because all the others are single employer visas. And one of the, that just doesn't work for people in the arts. And many artists don't even collaborate with anybody. They're in a studio and they may be creating things. So the O1 is just super flexible, and it really works incredibly well if it's structured properly. So the O1 has a maximum shelf life of 3 years, meaning you can get a visa that has a 3 years on it. And you can renew it as many times as you want. A lot of visas, you can renew it only a couple of times and then you're either out of here or you have to go to a green card. I know a lot of people, will have an O1 for many, many years because it's very flexible and kind of workable. And if it weren't for the stress of applying, it would make a lot of sense for that long term. So that's an O1 visa. Who is eligible for an O1? First, there's the overall definition, which is for people who can establish that they have prominence in the arts and are coming to the United States to do what they're famous for. And you have to be coming to the United States to do work here. That is similar to or in the same line as what you did in your home country or here probably for the next 3 years. So there's this kind of, I think of it as a kind of a longitudinal aspect to it and a latitudinal aspect, meaning we have to establish that somebody has a record of achievement which meets the requirements of the law. But we also have to establish that they're coming to the United States to do something in the future that is comparable to that or somewhat related to it. So there are these kind of competing things, like there's deal memos that establish what you're doing in the future, but there's also the record of your past. There's press from shows in the past. There's letters of recommendation expressing recognition for your work. There's, some people have gotten awards or nominations for their work. There's also grants. There's also, all the things that somebody in the arts may have been lucky enough to kind of get in terms of recognition for their work over the years that establish them as a prominent person in their field. The definition of prominence, it's so hard to know what that means. We have no idea, right? It means that other people in the field have a sense that you have work that they want to pay attention to. So there may be reviews in some newspapers or magazines. There may be, and you can imagine that when the regulations related to this law went into effect in the 1990s, the world is so different. Right. So now, social media is meaningful. In the old days, reviews in established arts magazines were meaningful. It's really a different world, and the world keeps changing. It's very, very important always to help your adjudicator understand why, a tweet, I don't know if tweets exist anymore, what are they called now on X?
X's, right.
See, I have trouble keeping up. If someone prominent, posts something about you on Instagram and there's, lots of responses to it, that's really meaningful. We've come a long way from requiring a review in the New York Times or Art in America or American Theater, all the kind of established channels from 40 years ago are no longer as necessary, but you have to take the time. So kind of getting ahead of myself in terms of what to look for. I'm sorry.
No, this is great because it reminds me that I think a really key part of this process for me to keep in mind too when I was going through and when I first started doing it was I just had to keep remembering that the people that are adjudicating this at USCIS are not theater people.
No.
And they have no idea. I mean, who knows? You never know who's doing it. Maybe someone has a passion for Broadway and comes to New York and sees shows. But you really have to assume that they don't see theater, they don't know theater, they don't know who's, you know, like they don't know what, I don't know, the public is or whatever. I mean, maybe they know what the public is, but we can't assume that they know these markers of prominence that we so readily have in our vocabulary and that we know about. And that a lot of the process is about helping them to understand, like, oh, this means a certain thing in the industry, you know.
So, like, I mean, that's the foundation
Yeah.
of advocacy and being a lawyer,
Right.
is actually communicating what we know to them so they get it.
Yeah.
We just hired a new coordinator in our office, and I've been trying to get her to understand what we're doing. And I keep saying to her, the adjudicator is a retired police officer who's trying to make some money on the side. So when we're talking about the public theater, we need to explain that, you know, it has like 800,000 Tony Awards or something. And then we have to explain what a Tony is. And then we have to explain what it means to be off-Broadway. We have to, you know, we have to actually help
Connect the
them,
dots.
yes, connect the dots.
Absolutely.
And, you know, so it's kind of, I love that process of actually bringing this world to them. You know, it's hard if you feel that the Immigration Service treats our people unfairly, but we have to separate that. We have to feel positively about the process or to make it work.
Mm.
As lawyers, we're a bridge between your complex, nuanced artistic career and an audience, this adjudicator, who lacks any sophistication in the area. That gives us an opportunity to communicate and to educate them. And so it has certain advantages, and we try to play that to the full. We connect the dots, we explain what everything means. Why is this significant? Why is this distinguished? We can't leave anything to chance.
So I actually think this is a great segue into my next question, which is, what does the process of applying for it look like for theater artists? And then, you know, kind of a sub question to that is, what have you seen? Have you seen processes to be different between applying as an actor or designer or the different fields in the theater? And what is that like?
Okay, Kevin, what's the choreography?
Choreography. First of all, let's talk in terms of time frames. We used to say that it took us about 10 weeks to prepare a petition. That depends on our workload. And different lawyers may be different on this front. But somewhere 2 to 3 months. It takes the Immigration Service, particularly if you have an East Coast petitioner, it takes the Immigration Service about 2 to 3 months to decide it. So you start to see this process as like an oil tanker moving through the ocean slowly, and the changes of direction are sort of difficult and have to be planned. So the process is one, first of all, after we get through the process of a retainer agreement, which establishes the attorney-client relationship, and we send out a welcome email that describes the process, and then we do a detailed questionnaire to elicit, to extract from the artist the information that we need to prepare the petition. It is fairly demanding because the end result of all this is a voluminous petition, somewhere between 300 and 500 pages of evidence, including passports and everything else, but also everything else. This is the largest, physically, these are the largest visa petitions of any category that I have faced, that I've done, and I've done them all. And it is a granular view of your career to date through the prism of the Immigration Service. And that prism focuses on certain things. They're focused on your career that's played out in public first, connected to distinguished productions or distinguished organizations in which you played a central role. Now, they have different words for all these things, and I don't want to get into that, but the concepts of distinguished productions, distinguished organizations, and your central role with each. That's the heart of everything. Everything kind of flows from that. Press, reviews. We also have to show expert recognition of your career, which we do through a variety of means. The awards you get, testimonial letters that we develop during the course of the petition. And that's important as well. Press is important when we have it. What am I missing here? Oh,
I think you're not missing anything, but I think that the overview is, there are two for the O1. One, you're here in the United States and you want to just stay, and you got some kind of status, whether it's student visa, whatever it is. The overview is a petition is filed for you with a change of status, meaning we're going to change you from F1 to O1. And the petition is filed for you, the petition is approved. And when that approval comes through, it also comes through with a new I-94, which is the thing that they issue when you enter the airport. But it's also the thing at the very bottom of your approval notice if you requested a change of status or an extension of status. So then it's like a magical spell. They've transformed you from an F1 or a H1B or whatever you were in before to an O1 independent artist.
Without leaving the United States.
That's right. So that's scenario one. The second one is you're in your home country or you're traveling around or you're here in the United States and you're on ESTA. You don't have an actual status. You can still file an O1, but that O1 approval will not include an extension or change of status to don the cloak that is the O1. You have to leave the United States. That's how I think of it, as a magic red cape. Is it not?
Okay.
You can see it.
Sure, yeah.
The color is optional.
All right.
Okay.
I like a good red cape.
Good.
But you leave the United States, go have an interview at a U.S. consulate abroad, probably in your home country. They will issue you an actual visa that they stick into your passport, laminated page that says O1. Then you go to the airport, you show your O1. You're probably going to show your approval notice also because you want the full 3 years on your new I-94, and enter the United States where they will bequeath to you your red cloak of O1-ness.
Right.
I really feel like it. I feel like it's a magical status, and therefore deserves to have a cloak associated with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing I'll say is I agree that the O1 gives you a lot of freedom. I think when you were talking about how you're able to work with a lot of people, I was like, yeah, the word is freelance. So it's really good for freelance artists. And
May I interrupt you?
Yes.
Freelancing is not permitted under O1.
Oh.
Well,
Sorry, okay.
I think this is the
I know.
discussion, okay? Because it's really important. You need to understand what the legal point of view is, which is that when Kevin was talking about what goes into a petition, that includes a ton of deal memos for your future work. And those get translated into an itinerary that spells it out in kind of a graphic formula.
Okay.
And then what's that? What's that itinerary? That's the backbone of your stay in the United States.
Okay.
Can you vary from that? A little, some. And that is, another legal issue that you always want to kind of be aware of. That let's say somebody had an O1 that had a lot of different plays and a lot of different shows, and they were also going to be a curator at the Rattlestick Global Forums thing. And then the Public Theater said, we really want you to be our director, our artistic director, and replace Oscar Eustace. If that happened, that person would probably need a new O1 because that's a material change in the facts that were presented in your O1 petition. So this is a good concept to just keep in mind. But, so that's, the extreme situation is that You're no longer going to do anything on your itinerary, and you're going to do something completely different. If, however, you had all these different engagements and you were going to be here at Rattlestick and things like that, but then you also were engaged to be the lighting designer at the Public for a show that's not on your itinerary, that's fine. You're allowed to add new engagements which are consistent with your O1 amazingness.
So let's call it planned freelance.
Plan freelance. Plan freelance. See, this is a very good example of the artist and the legal.
Right. Yeah, and but people write to me and they say, can I add this? And I'm like, yeah, why not? Like, and so you may at some time encounter a little pushback from some of the entities that are paying your paycheck. They'll say, but you're on an O1 and this isn't on your itinerary.
Yes.
And that's when you bring in your lawyer to fight for your money because it's wage theft if they don't pay you.
Right.
Yeah, and I won't take up too much time talking about this because I also say like I'm available afterwards if any of you want to talk to me personally. But there was a time, I think like pre-pandemic, where I actually was on 2 O1s because I was hired by Shakespeare Theater Company in DC.
Oh, I forgot.
And they were like, well, we're not on your itinerary, so we want our own O1 for you. And I was like, all right, if you want to do it, I was like, if you want to do it, and they did it. I mean, and I was a bit like, whoa, okay. But so there was a time when I had 2 O1s because of that.
And I think that, in that setting, I believe that an attorney that was advising that Shakespeare Company was wrong, that you could have added that show to your itinerary wasn't necessary. But a lot of employers, they care so much about safety. This is such a politicized area. People are nervous. It's better for them to just get you another O1, and God bless them, right?
Yeah.
Who cares?
I didn't have to pay the legal fees.
Right.
So,
Right. They wanted you that much.
Universities.
She's that amazing.
Back then.
Universities insist on this all the time.
Yeah. So there are, the big networks are tough about this.
Yeah.
Some of the universities in the New York area are rough on this area.
Yeah.
We see that universities are, they want to hire you to be a teacher in their theater department, and then they're like, but let's look at your visa. We've had to actually file amendments to visa petitions to just make sure that those universities are included. Some universities are better. They'll say, is there any teaching in your itinerary? And they'll go, and if there is, they're like, we're good. So you can see this is an area where nobody really knows. There's no guidance from the Immigration Service, and your attorney should help you feel confident going forward and dealing with these kinds of issues. It's not all done once your visa's in place.
But the goal in framing your petition back at the beginning is to give you the broadest employment authorization, the broadest itinerary that will suit your needs and your desires. I mean, that's key.
Yeah, you want it to be varied.
Right.
I just want to make sure that. Okay, great.
Okay. We're talking quick now.
Okay, yes. I'm going to bring us back into process because I'm assuming a lot of the people in the room are maybe at the beginning or thinking about it. So I'm going to bring us back there. So I do want to pose that question to you of what have you seen the differences to be between the different fields of, if you're an actor or a designer or a writer, applying for this, is there a difference?
My experience is there's tremendous differences between areas, like theater and the performing arts, or theater is one of the most supportive areas in that there are a lot of ways to explain why the Rattlestick Theater is a distinguished organization. I would say in the field of dance and choreography, there's much less stuff out there. They don't have OBs. It's really different in each field. In journalism, most of the awards are either student awards or are for people in their 50s, right? And so theater is absolutely the best. The other reason I think for theater is the greatest is because people in theater are familiar with this process. This is an international field here in the United States. Everybody works with everyone from around the world, and I think that people are tickled to sign a letter of recommendation. You know, you'll see all kinds of experiences on that level, but for the most part, if you know the person, they're so happy to be supportive. Your professors, the other people you've worked with, the directors, the playwrights, they're there and they remember you. They know how important your contribution has been. They know they can't do it without you. They know they're going to want to work with you in the future. All those things, I think that people in theater are very, very supportive.
Would
That's been my.
you say it's more difficult for an actor, let's say, than a scenic designer to get an O1?
I guess that's probably true. I mean, we tend to, as a law firm, we tend to work with people that are designers. That's really our favorite area. And I think that the adjudicators at the Immigration Service think they know who the big actors in this world are. They know Brad Pitt. And if you're not Brad Pitt, you're really up there. So I think that, but they know they have no idea who the costume designers are. And of course, the other thing is that we don't really need to fight about whether a lighting designer, a set designer, or a costume designer is a leading role in a production. Years ago, it used to be they're not the director, so how is their role a leading role? But these days, I really feel like the adjudicators understand what multi-something theater is.
Multifaceted.
That it's, I just think theater is the best kind of O1.
But at least there's that.
There's that. Yeah.
Okay, the last question I want to ask you all before we open up to questions from you all is if there's one piece of advice that you would give people applying for O1s, what would it be?
One piece. Go ahead.
One piece. Try to, because I'm sure that there are questions.
I mean, I just think go for it. Find out if something's going to work for you. Don't be shy. Obviously, if you're here, if you are working in the United States now, if you've come here, you are a person with tremendous courage. And we just think you're amazing. That courage is what will sustain your whole thing. And I'm very moved by it every day, actually. That's my advice, is revisit that.
I would supplement that with thinking about the size of the production that you're involved with and your role in it, and the size of an organization with which you work and your role in it. And the smaller the organization, while still being distinguished. And I'm not from New York, so I think in theater, everything in New York that takes place in New York is by definition distinguished. So theater groups in New York that are serious artistic ventures can be characterized as distinguished. You should have a critical role for that organization. The same goes with dramatic productions. It does not have to be Broadway to be grist for the O1 mill. And if you can be a lead in a smaller production, or a leading scenic designer, or lighting designer, or something like that, it is much better than being the assistant to the assistant to the assistant on a larger production.
Or a TV show.
Right. And see, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, we say this to actors all the time. Actors come out of the acting schools, and for the Americans, it's perfectly fine to be and extra on billions. And then that's how they kind of build their
I don't
resume.
know if billion still resonates.
I don't know. Well, it's recently terminated. It was recently, so I just have pictures of rooms with traders, and there's trader number 15. So that doesn't work for a non-US actor, because again, the concept of the centrality of the role in the production means that, focus your sights to a smaller production and where you can play a bigger role.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, like both, all of it. But I do really want to say, like, what April was saying about go for it and the courage. I think that's a really important element, because I think my experience whenever I was going through the process was like, oh God, do I really have to nudge that person? Oh, do I have to ask for this thing? Because it is a lot of asking. You're asking people to sign things for you. You're asking people to vouch for you. It's a lot. And there are times when, as artists, we're sort of really, I don't want to speak for everyone, but myself, you can be kind of shy about that and be like, oh, I don't want to bother them, or, but I think that throughout the process, I've really been encouraged to really do that and to learn how to ask for letters, ask for, letters, a lot of letters.
Letters and contracts.
Letters and contracts, letters and contracts.
Right.
And I think that the most sort of moving thing for me, not to get too Pollyanna about it, but has really been that I realize that when I ask, people are so happy to help. And I think like I have often told this to many people who have helped me in my process. Will is one of them, of course. I think Will's been there since the beginning with me for my process. And there are a couple of other key people like Che Yu that you're going to see tomorrow, Maria Stryer at Club Thumb has helped me a lot. Like, these people, I think when I look back and when I'm in the process, I kind of realize, like, wow, I really have people showing up for me. And it's stressful, but that human reminder also makes it really worth it. So it's both.
It's a social visa. It's really a social visa. You have to,
it's both.
It celebrates your connection within your field to other people.
Yeah. So with that, I'd love to open it up to any questions from any of you all.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this. First of all, I really appreciate it. My name is Raina. I was wondering, since I heard you would say that you represent mostly designers, do you happen to represent multidisciplinary artists? And is there a process to apply to your firm as an artist who doesn't know anything about legal aid 201 visas? And do you somehow scan the people who you're supposed to, like, who you want to represent you? What is that process? Because I really like your energy and your vibe, and I've met so many lawyers who I don't vibe with. I love that you said, I love that you said there's a bond between the artist and the legal, the lawyer, and I was like, I really want somebody who cares about me, and I see that already. So I'm just like wondering, how is that process to apply to your firm as a person of multidisciplinary artists?
You can go to our website. There's a button. Say like, hi, I met at Rattlestick. I'd like to talk about my 01. And then we'll get back to you and send you a short questionnaire, ask for your CV, and then the ball starts to roll, and here we are.
Right.
So have you ever rejected an artist to not represent them?
Oh, we are very,
Well, we're a small firm. So we can't take everyone who wants to work with us.
Oh, and so many people are not quite ready. We work with people so that they're approved, but there's only so much we can do. The lawyering is helpful in this process, but it isn't everything. This is by a long shot. And I think it's helpful to hear the truth also. Like, where am I? How can I get stronger? What can be done? I think that there are a lot of sources, mostly your colleagues, most people that are in 01, who will give you really helpful advice about whether, how close you are to it. What we refer to as career counseling, like what you need to do. I mean, our best career counseling is always get real press, make sure you're credited for all your work, and marry an organization. We once had a client say to us, so wait, you're saying to me I got to either marry an American or marry an organization? And she was right. Like, marrying an organization, having an ongoing relationship with an organization, and what's an organization? We'll get back to that. An ongoing relationship with an organization is one of the criteria. So while a lot of artists in the theater field do bounce around a lot, speed date, we do want, it's helpful for your career in terms of an O1 to actually go back to the same organization. Now, an organization could be Rattlestick. Yeah.
I think there was one time you said to me about Will Davis, you were like, he's an organization.
He is.
Right.
That's another, I agree. A prominent director with whom you work more than once is an organization. And that could be something in the future, that could be something in the past. Also, for designers, a prominent designer is an organization. That somebody who's like a Broadway costume designer does need people to work for them and make their designs happen. And if you work with them a lot, that's an organization too. So think creatively about what an organization is.
Do you consider universities as an organization?
It's hard to, we do, obviously, they're an organization, but it's hard to play a critical role for an organization. Because that's, who plays, I mean, like, let's talk, what's NYU? That's a big organization. It's hard to establish that somebody has a really critical role when so many people are involved. I prefer a smaller organization.
Right.
Now, something like the costume department at Fordham University could be an organization now. So there's a lot. Slice and dice is the name of the game.
Right. The devil is always in the details.
So there's a lot to think about and a lot to know about, and it's I think, and this is something that I realized a couple of years ago at, was that place in Brooklyn?
Oh, Wingspace.
Wingspace.
Yeah.
When people were talking about O1s.
Yeah, we did another panel.
That sometimes people who are thinking about getting a visa don't talk a lot about it with their friends. This is like, oh, you're not American, or you don't have a green card already. We need to, break down those doors and to feel, I mean, people that have gone through this process are so incredible. They should be so proud of it and yell it from the rooftops that this is not a process to be quiet about. This is something that should be praised every day and talk to people and share it. That you're thinking about it, you're going to find that there are people who want to talk about it and will have tons of advice. So yes, we do give advice, but our advice is probably not as practical as somebody that really knows the ropes from the inside.
And I would like to offer, like, please feel free to talk to me. I can give you the non-legal language version of it,
right?
Privately, if that helps a lot.
You're a veteran.
Sort of. And but are there any other questions?
Maybe one more.
Okay.
To conversation in the back.
Hi, my name is Nick. I just want to have a follow-up question with the multidisciplinary part. I'm wondering, is there a possibility to apply O1 as a multidisciplinary artist, like someone who does directing, writing, performing for different gigs?
How do you do it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Theater artist.
Yeah.
And so much of this is about presentation to the immigration service.
Yeah.
I think that years back, there was this thing about, oh no, you had to choose a lane. I don't see that anymore. It is rare for somebody to not do more than just something narrow. Multidisciplinary theater artist is a great way to go. I have no problem with that. I don't think the Immigration Service has a problem with it either. Because I mean, everything is informed by everything. And I mean, outside of the United States, people do everything. It's a weird thing here that people would be like just doing one thing. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Really
Thank you. Thank you guys for being here. I think it's great that you're interested. So.
Yeah, yes, thank you all for coming. Thank you again to April and Kevin for donating their time so generously and their advice and all of this. It's really like, this is very rare and special, so thank you.
I wonder how the station, Mel, just in the lobby. if
Oh,
anyone has
yeah,
other
sure.
Questions for Mel,
Sure.
and then we'll reconvene in a few minutes for our next planned freelancers panel.
I know we should change the name to Planned Freelancers Panel.
Planned
Right, exactly.
Thank you so much.
Okay, great.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I'll leave the water.
In person. Amazing.
How are you? Good.
Like a capsule or
Wherever people feel drawn to. Perfect. All right, so we can start off and then they can come join when they've lawyer chatted.
I think they're just exchanging contact.
Perfect, perfect. We're also streaming here, so hello to everyone at home. No, I love it. It looks great. And thank you to everyone that came out today for our panel series as part of the Global Forums Festival 2024, which is our 5th Global Forums, 2021, 2023. Yes, number 5.
Wow.
My name's James Clements. I'm a Scottish writer, actor, and theatre maker working between New York and the United Kingdom. I'm one of the co-curators and producers of this iteration of the festival, and along with both of you have done previous cycles of it as an artist. This is your first Global Forums experience. Welcome. Our panel today is on the freelance arts career, but we just found out from our lawyer friends that we're not supposed to call it freelancing what we do. We're sort of planned freelancers. So this is the planned freelance arts career now, which is funny. But we're going to chat a little bit about creative values and the balance between what's on your visa form and what's kind of industry standard and those kind of questions. We can maybe give a similar caveat that they did, that this is not legal advice from us. We're just going to share our journeys and hope that that kind of informs where you are. And I'm joined by 3 brilliant artists today. Liz Peterson is a maker of live performance who has worked all over the US and the world. Your current research explores how live performance events may activate embodied forms of attention in the spectator. I love that. I was very drawn to that line. And you got your MFA in directing from Columbia University, amongst many other things that I'm sure we'll get into. Ranjia is an interdisciplinary theatre artist originally from Shanghai. The 2021 to 22 Beatrice Terry resident at the Drama League and a resident director at the Tank, who has also worked and beyond, including here at Rattlestick. Fantastic immigrant t-shirt is has been a resident artist at Proyecto, is a founding member of Italia, which is a theatre company for women plus trans non-binary folks to make theatre here in New York, and has worked at Here Art Centre, The Brick, Rattlestick, Theatre Lab, and more. And I love this part of your bio. Your artistic mission is to build cultural bridges by making art travel around the world. Which feels very topical for why we're here today. So welcome. Thank you for being part of this. If we're comfortable, no pressure if you're not, in lieu of kind of usual introductions, I wondered if we would share our pronouns, how long we've been in the US, and all of the visas that we've ever had so far. Because I'm sure for lots of people, they're just a series of meaningless letters right now. So James, he, him, I've been in the US on and off for 13 years. And I was F1, and then OPT, and then 301s so far.
Wow.
That's my, yeah, I'm applying for my 4th next week.
Oh my.
So fingers crossed.
Wow. Wow. My pronouns are she, her, and I've had a similar F1 OPT, and now I'm in process of applying for my first O1.
Lots of fingers crossing.
Thank you.
I'm just doing math in my head. What year is it?
In theory, it's 2024.
Time is a construct.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost 16 years. F1 OPT. I'm in the last year of my 3rd O1. I'm about to apply for my 4th. Starting conversations this summer. Yeah.
I'm Giorgia. I use Sheer. I also F1, OPT, and I one O1 so far. I only have one in my pocket. I've been here 8 years, almost 8 years. And I'm about, in like a year, my O1 expires. So similarly, I will be in the talks for
back in the trenches.
Another one, I guess. I don't know, change my mind every day.
Yeah. Exactly.
Somehow it gets harder. Like
Right, yeah, you're like, why? I find it gets harder.
I feel like the level of work improves as you develop more career in America, right? And as the advice from April earlier of like you have to focus on being the lead in smaller productions. But as my career advanced, that's not how my career trajectory goes most of the time. Like I find it very hard to go back to doing like a parking lot theater, even if that would mean I'm the lead artist and doesn't get paid at all, as opposed to like assisting on a Broadway show, which doesn't go super well in my one, but that's the step of career that I should take as a director. So,
Yeah.
And so is that something that, the question for everyone, but Ran first maybe, is that something that you take into consideration when you're kind of plan freelancing your way through a year? Are you like, great, I've done a couple of assisting things, I should maybe like direct a little reading for a week, or is that something you're cognizant of as you go, or is it you realize at the end of the 3 years?
That's what I was realizing at the end of the 3 years, because I have done like smaller things in workshops, and I feel like it's all about presentation. You can talk your little workshop up or like talk up a reading, but I feel this rebellious streak in my belly of like, why can't I put my assisting gig on my O1, because that's actually super fancy, but they don't understand. So that's the struggle, but trust your lawyers, I guess.
Yeah.
And I guess kind of in that similar vein, a question that I wanted to ask, because I don't know if people feel this, but sometimes it can be a lot of doom and gloom thinking about how hard it is to be here, and it is the difficulties that lie ahead. So I guess if Giorgia, you want to kick this one off, what is a kind of superpower of being an immigrant artist in the US, and what is a drawback? If you had to kind of choose a primary thing that is difficult and a primary thing that is like
worth it,
or honestly like a kind of tool that we have that our US counterparts don't have, that kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know if I might be going off on another tangent, but it's more or less the same. I feel like the visa, as hard as it is, will always push you. So I've seen so many of my American friends from the US who were born here, et cetera, they kind of like slack off, they don't have something that they have to push for, that they have to keep working for. You have to, like, we get a gift of inventing our own things because we have to put it on paper. And I think that's definitely something that will make you a strong artist in general, this like gift of inventing and adapting to what this this United States environment offers. I think that we will, like we all do, really search for what we want to do, and we make it happen. So I think that's something that's very good for us that we have in our pocket that makes us different, and that will teach us how to live in this city that doesn't forgive you and will like throw you by the hair. And then another thing that we have as like immigrants, people who come from different countries, that a lot of the time we travel or we go back home if we're lucky enough, whatever home is, and you're like, what the hell am I doing there? Like, why? There are so many other ways of living, There isn't New York, and this is something that I'm truly like coming to terms with right now. New York is not the center of the universe. It's not, the way of life here is not the only way to live. And so there is a bit of a drawback in like, why do I have to make all these sacrifices and live by this system when literally like there are so many other places in the world, and sometimes the art is even better. I don't know. I just went to Brazil and I was like, whoa, Brazilian theater is awesome. What are we doing here?
I feel like there is an aspect of like, yeah, I feel like my life is probably going to be better anywhere else in the world and not like paying $20 for just a sandwich and a cup of coffee
A glass
from like
of wine.
a random little store. But there is a network that we've built here. There are friends that I can walk to and have a drink with, and that's a luxury that sometimes we don't get to have because we're driven so much by the craft and the visa. But like similarly to what you said, the simple answer to that question is we have no fallback, which is an advantage and disadvantage at the same time. Because I can't choose a plan B, I can choose an alternate career when I feel like I'm losing steam in theater because your visa literally does not allow you to. So you kind of have to find a way to be passionate about it again and keep going because you have something to prove to like literally the government.
What about you, Liz? What's the immigrant superpower?
Yeah, I feel like what you're saying is really resonating with me right now because I feel like, well, I freelanced in Toronto for about 15 years before I came to New York. And when I was gigging there, and I'm a Canadian citizen, so I could do it there and I could have other jobs and that was okay. But it really came out of the people that I knew and the network and the community that I had there. That was how I found work. You know, like I actually didn't have an agent and I worked in like both as a performance maker and as a performer. And then sometimes I would cross into dance and sometimes it was visual art and sometimes it was theater. And those streams were entirely because of the people that I knew and the kinds of work that we were all going to see. And I think that is, that became, it started to feel to me like, because I when I grew up on the East Coast of Canada, my family, we immigrated to Canada and neither of my parents are Canadian. And my dad taught me that as well. Like he was a brown guy in rural Canada trying to start his own business. And we didn't have our family near us. And our family really became the people that he would make connections with. And so like, I think that superpower is really like, you create a network that also is like what sustains you in more than just like a financial way or like an ability to be here, which is huge, but it's also who you're in dialogue with, like who you're, the work that you're making is in dialogue with. That's who's seeing your work. That's who's reflecting back to you what you're doing. And so when I was kind of getting into the process of figuring out, oh, okay, who do I make contact with to be in the conversation about my O1 visa and about saying like, I would like to be able to continue to work with you, or I would be like, I have this thing, this is what I can bring. And that kind of like what you were saying, it forced me to activate those conversations in a way that I never really had to when I was in Toronto, but it has been kind of an interesting process to initiate those conversations because I'm like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. Like I've done this before. Yeah. My dad did, like we did this before. This is kind of how my family has figured out how to be places where we didn't have extended family. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's like, I think it's part of the thing that makes being an artist and moving somewhere new, it activates like culturally what you're doing. It makes what you're doing like more meaningful, I think, in a way that if you're immigrating on a visa where you have one sponsor and that's a big corporation who's saying, okay, you only work for us and we pay you everything and it's fine and you can live here and that's your pass. I think it's a different thing that is actually like your contribution to what you're bringing and the way that you create meaning in that is, it makes it more valuable. So I think that it's been really interesting. But I'm at the very beginning of the process, right? Like, it's
Yeah, I love that
I'm
we're
not
all at
for-
different
yeah,
spots.
I'm not for it. So I was really curious to be like, oh no, it gets harder.
I'm just way more jaded at this point.
Yeah, maybe you're patient. I don't know if this also is a way that I feel about it. And I think the lawyers said it really beautifully, that we shouldn't have to jump through hoops. The system should be more understandable. But the first one, you're just so terrified the whole time that you feel like just grateful when it's over. And I think by the third or fourth, I was like, why am I still, my patience
not really.
went
I'm
over.
also Chinese, and we all have like this crap relationship between the government. So even at about to apply for fourth one, I'm still gonna be terrified. So that's like the different multiple layers of systemic problems that we're gonna have to face. So depending on where you're from, I think just be mentally prepared of like, what that might mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's important, I think, to flag that the kind of immigrant experience is a fallacy. Like it's not a monolithic experience, and all of the socioeconomic factors that exist in other parts of our life are also baked into that process.
I think also
please.
also the journey, like being an immigrant coming in from an F1 to an OPT versus coming in like as an immigrant and like coming in straight without having that three-way through a student visa is also a different thing, because I know you're coming in with as you say, there's so many layers to it.
And so I guess, Ram, maybe you want to kick us off with this one. Do you generally find yourself drawn to working with other immigrants? Is that something you seek out consciously?
Not necessarily. I think as an artist, I'm drawn more towards people whose artistic identities and goals are similar to mine. I think in the perfect world, I would love to work with people from all kinds of backgrounds, especially in New York. You have that opportunity, but it's very difficult to fight an uphill battle when you are trying to make your work seen. So a lot of the times I find myself trying to insert myself in bigger institutions, but those are usually like American run, and you end up working mostly with American artists, so that you can kind of, because I have no connection here whatsoever. My whole family is back home. So if I were to find network and build upon something for myself, I have to find someone with roots and connections here. But then I think once you have established a little of that, then you come back and try to work with, at least that's for me, like these past couple of years when I have already had some more experience and network existing, I found myself starting to work with more people who are also on a one journey. So because I understand what they need and like what they're coming from.
What about yourself? Is that something you?
It's not something that I have started, that I have been really conscious or mindful of. I have, well, some things have kind of fallen into my lap. Like I'm doing a stage reading today that's part of IATI, which is the Cimientos Festival, and that's not specifically like immigrant, but it's Spanish speaking, and so it kind of like falls into, there's a lot. So I'm directing something that's like a Chilean playwright, and he's not applying to come to the US at all. He's visiting, like to get to play. But yeah, it's not something that I have started to think about in any kind of conscious way. But I think it's really interesting to see that there's like I'm realizing the affinities that you can have with other people who are in that process, because it is such a specific like way that you feel it in your body, right? Like you're like, it's something you think about every day. Like, oh my God, okay, I have to send out that other email. I have to send out this other thing. I have to, it's like, it's just always there. And it's just a different condition of being in some ways. Yeah.
I think I will add that like I found myself trying more and more to like figure out a way to build connections between other O1 artists and American artists, because I think for me that might be more helpful for them as opposed to like all of us working together. Because where's the money? Where's the playhouse where we could put up a play, you know? And a lot of times the work we get are completely out of our control. Most of the plays that I direct, I have no say in who I hire or who I casting. So it's really not up to us to choose who we work with, but we can do a lot with like pushing some of the connections that could happen.
And then, Giorgia, for you, example,
I'm on the other
the opposite.
spectrum.
Yeah.
I found myself to only work with international immigrant artists, and it's kind of like been my mission, I would say, and it has developed over the years that I've been here. But my theater company is only, I mean, it started as only international women. Of course, we also include all genders, but it is mainly to tell those stories. So what we like to say now is that it's not like it's really about who for us. So who are we involving? And we do try. It is an uphill battle. It really is, because you're like, oh my god, like we have to find internationals. We have to find internationals. We have to find internationals. But it makes such a difference in the room, and it, like, not to say that the other option is bad, but it for us it's so important, not only because it gives another purpose to our art, to our company, like a purpose that makes us feel good in our bones, but also because the stories that we tell and that we hear really speak to our bodies and our experiences. And I think that that's like a beautiful place and beautiful art to cherish and flourish. Very different, because as a director, you probably get put on, like right now I'm working as a producer for like I literally just came for rehearsal and I have to go back for a theater company that is in Buenos Aires, and we're bringing the show here, and we're off Broadway now. But it's like I'm like drawn to international art, to like immigrant. They're all from South America, and it's like I feel like as much as for some art you may not choose, I feel like I'm because I chose that's my mission in art, to work with immigrant artists, to tell those stories, to cherish those kind of environments. Now that's all I'm getting, and I'm very happy about it. Yeah.
Do you have any insight on how to potentially like sustain that financially or just like structurally? Because I feel like that's a beautiful mission, and I feel there are several points in my life I'm only going to work with like international people. But
Is Italia a non-profit theatre company?
Man,
That's a whole different panel.
Yeah, it's a whole different panel. We when we started, we had an accountant who wasn't so, then she disappeared and whatever, and she told us we are C corporation, and we're like, okay. I mean, I was 20, so like I was like, okay, sure, C corporation, sure. And then we're like, why are we not a non-for-profit? Because if we were, we would get so much more income. Not only, but it's also like our mission is so non-for-profit, like, but no, we're not. But so, to go back to your question, I've had my survival job, that is not necessarily artistic, and that sustains me. Now this is like the first summer where I'm actually doing just theater, and that's sustaining me less than my other summers, but you do what you gotta do. In terms of the company, it's grants, it's donors. It's really about like unapologetically putting your mission out, like when we look for grants or when we look for donors, we don't hold back. We're like, we're immigrants, we're women, we tell stories about this, we make space for this. People like it. And I get much, like, I feel like the work is, I don't know, I work better than with Americans.
Well, I love this, like all the different ways that the sausage can get made. And that leads perfectly into our next question. And maybe, Ryan, you can kick this one off. You know, Chile, Scotland, China, Italy. I'm sure however many more in the room. Do you think your background and where you're from informs your creative and artistic values? Of course, on a human level, like the way you were raised, but in kind of subtle or overt ways. Do you see it in your aesthetic as a maker? Do you see it in the project you're drawn to? I'm curious.
I think so. I think philosophically, the golden medium and all of the Chinese philosophy and upbringing is kind of sneaking their way into my aesthetics. I find myself drawn to the existence of negative space in a lot of times in the stage picture that I paint, which is very prominent in Chinese painting. And I don't think I was consciously making those choices. And a lot of the Chinese opera, like Peking opera, using a stick for a horse, or like a lot of the Asian performing arts using like a folding fan in place of literally every single prop in the piece is something that I apply in a lot of my directorial choices, sometimes more deliberately than others. I think in terms of politically and culturally, sometimes it can be a negative thing for my identity to become something that people make assumptions about me in terms of what I'm interested in making and working on. So sometimes I lean into it to get work, or sometimes I fight against it so that I'm not constantly just doing Asian trauma play. Because when you talk about identity, there's a lot of trauma, and I don't want to put myself in that like very dark and
all the time.
But I think the most delicious part has always been the cultural influence that's almost insidious, which is not a good word, but I mean it in a good way.
A good insidious in a good way. What about you, Liz?
Yeah, I think that's true as well.
And your like dual identity, I suppose.
Yeah, well, with me, it's a little harder to identify sometimes because neither of my parents were from the same place, and I didn't grow up in the places where they were from, and we're all kind of from different places, and we lived in different places together. And so when I see where my impulses are taking me, or where the way that I'm interpreting what I see in front of me, sometimes it's hard to track where that's coming from, or if it's what part of me is resonating with it in terms of like cultural identity. But because I'm pretty generative, like I love directing existing works, but I also am really into devising and emergent narratives. And so when I'm working in that kind of a mode, like the images that come up and the places and the landscapes and the kinds of stories that come out, I'm like, oh, that's from the recesses of this history of like growing up in Newfoundland, or like this is from when I lived in the south of Chile, and this is from my grandfather who's from India, and like those kinds of things where like they come out. Yeah, but I don't have a lot of control over it.
That's interesting.
So sometimes I'm not able to identify it so much, but I think I think especially when you're someone who if you are in a process where you're having to work really quickly and you don't have a lot of time to assess what's happening or like how you're responding to things, it's really until after that you're like, oh, what was that? Where did that come from? You know?
I feel like, again, probably different for you.
Yeah, a little. I mean, actually quite similar. I was born in Italy, and then I lived like in India actually till I was 17. And then I came here from India, and like I learned English in India. So then when I got here, I had a very weird accent. I had an Indian accent, and it was very strange. But anyway, I don't know why I said that. But yeah, I also can't really track. I think that what is the one common thread that does absolutely resonate in my work and in my mission and where I find work and where I go and the people that I surround myself with is this idea that we are still looking, right? That like we don't know. We don't know where we're looking. We're constantly looking and adapting, and we're trying to create a space. And it's so strange how you were saying that, you know, sometimes like for the stuff that my agent and my manager sends me is all Italian stuff. Like to the point where like I was like, oh my God, I haven't lived there since I was 10. Like 10. Do you understand? Like I only did elementary school there. I can barely write an email. But I am gonna put out my Italian accent because I know you like it. And it's like, wait a minute. It's just, I think that the idea of searching and then like sitting back and being like, that's where that came at. That whole spirit, that is the core of my art and of the art that I'm trying to create. Also, I think that what does really reflect in my art and in my artistic process and collaborative process is this thing that we all experience being multicultural, being from somewhere else, which is, again, going back to the visa, I need to do this. So I am gonna work my ass off. Like all of the international artists that I know, that I work, are freaking reliable. They will get your shit done because they know what it means like to have a list of things and to have to do them. And it's like people like I'm fairly young, you know, and I'm like I'm not trying, but like I'm producing off Broadway now, and it's like the biggest thing that I've ever done. And I go on Zoom and people are like, so where's the producer? I'm like, hi, me. Me. And I'm gonna get shit done because I had to apply for a visa when I was 21.
Slightly shifting. Yeah, no, I love it. It's great. Slightly shifting gears into the more freelance specific, or whatever we're supposed to call it, specific style in which most artists work. I was wondering if people had kind of rubrics they use to make job decisions and to decide sort of what jobs to take, because when you have a portfolio career, you're designing and curating yourself. I have one that I always share with my students when I teach that someone told me years ago, which is a job as a freelancer. It's like the triangle of a New York City apartment. So dream New York City apartment is affordable, huge, and in a great location. It's very unlikely to be all three, but it needs to be at least two. One is not enough. And so it's, does the job pay well? Does the job fulfill you creatively? Does the job forward your career? Every now and again, you get the dream job that does all three, but I would posit that if it's not doing at least two, talk to your mentors, talk to your people, and really be like, it's only doing one. This is why I'm going to do it anyway, because it's temporary. Like it might be fine to do it with one, but that would be my tip, is run it through that triangle. And if it's not giving you at least two of the three, think very carefully. And I'm curious if anyone else has kind of barometers they use to decide.
Can you say that to me again, please?
So well paid, creatively fulfilling, advance your career. All three is a dream. If it's less than two, if it's just one of the three, especially long term, I would think very carefully.
That's so good.
I know, isn't that great?
It's really good.
I run every job I get through that.
I have a fourth point of whether or not it goes on a visa, because sometimes it's very different.
So it's like a square. For immigrants, it's a square.
Yeah, it's the things that would go on my visa very like prettily and stuff is sometimes not
to fit the
same.
narrative
Yeah.
of the visa.
It's interesting. It's a gut thing. Like if someone's coming to me with a project and I'm like, I don't know how to solve that problem. And if it keeps nagging me, I'm like, that's only going to get bigger. That problem
okay.
is only going to get bigger the further we get along. And do I want to be dealing with that problem 2 months from now? No.
That's
You
good.
know, there's-
Like an anti-problem.
Yeah, and it's just
approach.
it's usually just like a little like whisper of something, but I like try to listen for those in the early stages because those whispers only get louder the deeper you get into the
The more-
process.
the more into
So what
the
are you
weeds.
willing to like commit to down the line? But yeah, that's
Right now, like in recent years, funny enough, there is another like more gut reaction type of choice. Is did they reach out to want to hire me because they trust my artistic identity fits this project, or do they think I'm a good fit because what I look like?
Like a diversity hire.
Yeah. So I think if it's the latter, then I'm not gonna take it.
And do you gauge that through tone and, you know, like, is that you can just sort of feel in the conversation if they're consciously?
I think it's a gut.
Yeah.
Because I at one point I got an email from a guy, like a boomer aged white man writer who probably was just emailing all of the Asian directors because he wants to write a play about Asian immigrants in rural America. And I'm like, I don't think I'm your gal.
Yeah, I don't know if his perspective on that
Right.
is what is, you know, like you commission a writer if you want to.
Yeah.
Don't just write your piece and then ask a person from the community to direct the piece.
Yeah, I think all of that, those said, I do like the triangle/square thing. I really do. I also like to look at like where these people have come from. Like if somebody has, I know that they've gone through the same struggle in terms of coming here, adapting, leaving somewhere more stable, and then I'm likely to want to work with them more. Like I do like to also have that point of like, who are you? Can we bond over struggle? Or just, past. Because I feel like that just makes the art better. It just does. Yeah. Are we talking about survival jobs at all?
Either, because I mean, that's part of a portfolio career, like, you know, of, especially at the beginning of an artistic career, you're almost certainly going to be trying to do something else.
Yeah.
Some people walk out of college and like book a TV show, but most people don't. And so like, I think survival job is part of the equation.
Yeah, I think especially like, and this is, I mean, I feel I'm only on my first one, so I feel like the two of you definitely know this more, but there's going to be a point where you're going to stop saying yes to everything, like that gut feel, and it's such a difficult thing to learn. Like, it's so hard, very hard for me still to say no to something, you know, to not say yes to everything. But wait, why did I get into this?
And you've got the thread, it's right there.
Yeah. Survival jobs. Yeah, but it was I think that was a thing apart. Right? something on the side. Well, you know, I think that I'm a bit in a phase right now where I'm actually going a little against like the visa thing, you know, like in terms of like, do I pick this because of like it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be good on my visa. Like for some reason, I'm starting to really reject that. And I think that it's mainly because I've been really finding myself traveling. And so like, I'm really starting to think that this is not the only place in the world. And yeah, so I was talking about survival jobs. Have a survival job. Find something that you like.
Flexible.
And that is flexible. And that.
Do they allow survival jobs now?
No.
So talk to whoever employs you in that survival job as well.
And on your OPT, again, not legal advice. On your OPT, I'm pretty sure you can do anything. It doesn't have to relate to your field. Is that not the case?
It has to relate to your field.
But you can always like word it
within reason.
But I've heard that they could call your employer and like, if your employer is like, oh, they wrote dancer because it's like a theater diner, but really
They're a
server,
waiter, yeah.
and they say that you're a server, you could be in violation of your visa.
I think it used to be a little bit more free.
And not in 01, I don't think, but in OPT,
In
I
OPT, I
remember.
remember I was doing whatever because
It's changed.
wow.
Well, that actually brings me nicely into the last question, then we can open it up for a few minutes, which is, again, this is not legal advice from any of us. How flexible have you found the 01 kind of relating to industry standard versus what's on it? So I'm happy to share, for example, for me, I never expanded my 01 to include the teaching at universities that I do, because I think that's an industry standard thing that people do. They're, you become a theatre adjunct, and that has not been a problem, for example, so far. How strictly do you follow what's on your visa, if you're comfortable sharing that?
Wait, what do you mean, like taking? Because I've been taking university and like jobs as Stella Adler and things like that.
Right, and you have not expanded your 01 beyond the original title.
No, because when I take a job, that gives me an adjunct job description in the university, but the job title that I have on the production is still director.
I see.
Like
okay.
When I got a job at Stella Adler, I had to grade them at the end of the semester, but I was not their teacher. I was their director. So I think it's still the same role.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I have to think about it. Well, I guess I found it very limiting. I actually think that for this next round that I'm gonna apply, I'm thinking about whether I should change my 01, because right now it's for as a performer, but I've been doing a lot of producing work. Always with I don't want to become a producer, but it depends.
There's a creative impetus behind these projects.
If I can understudy, right, or if I can come on a couple of nights, like the goal is to act, but I prefer being a producer than working at events, right, like dancing at like some 16-year-old party, like which is my survival job, right? Like animator, dancer, and so I'm actually now wondering whether I should change to a multi-disciplinary artist visa, 01, instead of just performance, because I found it very limiting.
That's what I have, I think.
The multidisciplinary.
Yeah, because the first couple ones, the first two were writer/director, and then it just got really like limiting. So I think when I signed on with April, the third one, I think we just put multidisciplinary theater artist.
And did that count as a renewal, or did you have to start from
It's
scratch?
a renewal.
It's a renewal.
Yeah.
So that's something, just if you do decide post OPT to go for the 01, thinking with a good amount of lead time about what you want to apply for, what do you want to be able to do. There's nothing stopping you, as the lawyer said, from doing multiple things. It just puts more onus on you to prove extraordinariness in multiple areas.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes better to start with one category or two and then grow it as you expand. In our last few minutes, though, with our wonderful panelists, any questions from you folks? Yeah, please, Anita.
I would love to know how you all went about finding work and building those connections with theater companies, especially just being aware of not so many people I feel don't want to hire someone who's on their OPT, particularly for union jobs, or finding representation feels a little impossible. So yeah, I'm just curious about how you went about working.
All of the jobs I have ever had that is good ones are all through some people that I met who put my name to somebody else. I've joined every lab that I could be, that I've gotten in to get like this connection, and I am dreadfully introverted, so I'm like actually very bad at it. So if you're actually good at networking, I imagine that would be a good idea. Theoretically, I understand how good, and I do. I don't know how to do it very well.
For me, because I'm still I'm more recently graduated from my master's, a lot of the connections I've made have come through. And I think April was saying that at the end, your mentors, if you were coming through a program, those are the people that you can turn to and say, can you connect me to this person? Who can you connect me to? Because they are probably the point person to make recommendations on your behalf. Yeah.
And kind of in that similar vein, I feel like as much as possible, becoming kind of part of the ecosystem of whatever field you're in. So coming to panels, coming to events, going to openings, just knowing what's going on, being a face. It's like, what's that thing you have to see an ad 5 times before it impacts you? It's like, if there's a theater, you're the ad. If you wanna work at Rattlestick or at Soho Rep, how many of their events can you make it to? How many panels can you meet? How many mixers can you go to?
Yeah.
All of that stuff. Again, even for dreadfully introverted people, it's probably harder.
Like
but you gotta do it.
Again, this is something I do not do enough, even though I understand that you should, which is have no shame, email people, ask them out for coffee. If they don't respond to you, keep emailing. I do not do this. I should be doing this, but yeah.
And I feel like it's, there's many downsides in some ways to the Zoom world, but now that Zoom is such a thing, people really can't get away with not meeting with you for half an hour. No matter how busy you are, everyone has half an hour once in 6 months if you just keep going.
I think it goes back a little bit to what I was saying in terms of like, who are you? And if I have like one person who I met and I was like, wow, yes, you, I want to work with you. I do everything I can to foster that relationship. And yeah, I mean, obviously within my limits, like, I'm not gonna like chase them and like, but that always helps. Like those are, again, all the great jobs have been because of people that I've liked and connected to in a very like not superficial level, like a personal level. And
yeah, authenticity. I feel like it's maybe an overused word, but if you're finding organizations and collaborators and mentors who your artistic values actually align, as opposed to just, it can feel, I think at the beginning, just like you want to say yes to everything and you want to get moving and nothing's happening. But if you try and move with as much intentionality as possible, you'll find yourself in rooms that you actually want to be in with people who you respect. And not everyone's artistic values are the same, not everyone's institutional values are the same, which is fine. But if you, trying to be intentional while also surviving and making money and getting your visa, like it's a lot of plates in the air. Do we have one more question, or should we?
Yeah, we have probably time for one more.
If there is one. Yeah, round us out.
So yeah, I started my OPT as like last week.
Oh, congratulations!
So I'm wondering how I can make like the most out of it. So if you have any advice on that would be lovely. Especially as someone who wants to
dust off the cobwebs. You want to produce your own work?
Yeah.
I worked at anthropology during my OPT. Those are different worlds.
Find your people.
Find
your people. I think, I was lucky enough to meet some of them during college. And I was like, you, me, theater company. Find your people.
And keep finding new people, I think.
Yeah.
That's another part of it, because you could build a community, but like also expand that community. And another thing is, I think what really kind of helped me through because I didn't go to school for theater. I went to school for psychology and then media studies. And during OPT was the time that I actually built a portfolio to apply for OPT. And the only thing sometimes you could do is creating your own worlds. Because when you don't have any like existing connection or strong network, you're not gonna get a leading job somewhere. So you have to kind of create your own thing, and that can be a launch pad.
I also think this is probably, I don't know if I should say this or if I believe this is healthy, but for the OPT year, as long as you're not in situations that feel unsafe or workplaces that feel unsafe, I would say kind of do every single thing you can. Every terrible short film, every terrible play reading, do it, write your own press release, submit that to Broadway World. And then once you get your O1, work-life balance and be discerning and everything. But if you have the capacity, assist people, go in for days, like anything, because you're just trying to build. That's like the trick of the O1 is we are expected to achieve extraordinariness in the space of a year. At the age of usually 22, if you do undergrad, it's ridiculous. It is completely ridiculous. And so you're just going to work with your lawyer to build a narrative around what you do. So as much as you can just pedal to the metal, which goes against everything we talk about with work-life balance and boundaries. But for 1 year, if you can, I would say do everything you can. I don't. You're in the thick of it right now.
I'm in the thick of it now, but I also I gigged for 15 years before I applied, so I have a
context,
kind of a career before it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I would say, like, when you go to see shows, go to the openings. Going to the openings is really like a kind of, you can like get yourself invited to the after party or these kinds of things. Like, I think that's something I used to do a lot in Toronto, and I've kind of like fallen off the bandwagon of doing that here, but it is kind of a specific thing.
And free dinner and a glass of wine, you know?
Yeah. Force yourself.
Yeah.
Force yourself to network if you're not terrified of it.
Yeah.
And on that note, I'd love to say big thank you from myself, Global Forums and the Rattlestick team, to Rand, Giorgia, and Liz. It was such a wonderful panel, and thank you all for coming. We have another very exciting panel starting in just a few moments. Would you like to intro or as well?
You can say it, or I can say it, or.
Kate, why don't you?
Sure. So next we'll be joined by the wonderful Clint Ramos and Tea Alagic to have a conversation about so many amazing things, I'm sure. So yeah, we'll take a little break for a few minutes, and I hope you'll stick around as well to hear the talk. Yes, thank you.
And especially, I feel like both of you are in rehearsal today, so thank you for making the time. Thank you.
to see you.
Hey.
Oh, hi, how are you? Great.
Can you all come a little closer since it's like only 5 of us? It's not like. Yeah, it's like we can all have. Thank you.
So cool.
I love this show from
Oh my
yesterday.
God, it was.
Oh, it's so good.
And it was a masterpiece.
Oh,
Yeah.
and tonight and tomorrow.
Yes, you're welcome to come and see.
Yeah.
7 p.m. tonight, 3 p.m. tomorrow. Come on. Here we are. Amazing. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. This is our final panel conversation, I should say, with these two extraordinary artists who have known each other for a long time, so I hear. You're like too old. Just met. Just a little, actually just a little bit. Just a tiny bit.
Your panelist has to go to the bathroom, like before the panel.
Amazing. And yes, I'll let you both take it away and introduce yourselves, but just thank you so much for being here. And we're so excited to hear everything you have to say. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, you want to go first, introducing yourself?
Yeah, I'm Clint Ramos. My pronouns are he, him. I do a lot of things, you know. I'm a designer. I'm also a producer, and I do a lot of things. But I also lead an institution, a town called New York City Center Encores, and we do revivals of shows. And I'm originally from the Philippines. Yeah, born and raised there.
Thank you for coming. Yeah, I'm Tea Alagic. I'm born in Bosnia, Herzegovina. I came to United States in 1997, and I'm a freelance director. But I didn't start as director. I started as an actor, and I'm also a writer, and I teach at the new school. And we know each other for some time, right?
For a long time. No, Teo was, is still like one of the most like imaginative directors I've ever met. And you went to Yale, right?
I went to Yale.
Yeah.
That's what I did.
And I went to NYU.
Like a memories.
Yeah. And I went to NYU, and when we were coming up, you know, people would always say, "Oh, there's this woman, her name is Taya," and everybody was talking about Taya. So, and we finally, you know, we tried to work on many things, but I think the last thing we worked on was a Romeo and Juliet.
It is.
Yeah.
That was our last show.
When the world was different.
Yeah, I was today, before I was about to come here, I was like, okay, let me look online. I was like, Clint, your resumes are like hour long, right? It's amazing how many Tony Awards you have and all kinds of awards. And I was just like, wow.
No, I mean, it's a long time. Like, listen, we've been working for a long time.
Yeah,
so, you know.
You've really achieved so much. Can you, like, how do you do? I mean, and then I also like you doing films as well, right?
Yeah,
Television.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like, it's both. I think as a, you know, and you know this. You know, I think both as an immigrant, first of all, I'm just gonna say that we want to keep this casual, so you can ask anything and talk to us about anything, because we don't really, you know what I mean. But everything that I'm gonna say, I'm not gonna speak for Taya, is really from my experience, right? And also, we immigrated at a different time, right? And so when going back to your question, you know, as a designer, because that's where my training was, I went to school for set and costume design for stage and film at NYU. And in order to make ends meet, you had to kind of string along jobs, you know, and to really break even, you would have to do at least, you know, between 15 to 20 like gigs a year.
Yeah.
And that would be off Broadway, off Broadway. You know, if you get a Broadway show, then maybe you can knock off like 3 off Broadway shows or something like that. But that's how like that kind of like built, you know. And so you would just like try to be sneaky with directors when they would look you in the eye and be like, "You're gonna be there a lot, right?" And then and you're like, yeah. And I would always say, "My presence will be really felt."
Yeah.
You know? But that's kind of like over, you know, 20 plus years, you kind of develop that sort of resume and relationships and all of that kind of stuff. But I have to say, like, part of that was like, you know, as you know, like getting work in the first 5 years was hard, you know, just because of, you know, many things that compounded also by both your immigrant situation, just by being like the other, you know what I mean? And you're just not, yeah.
I think I was just saying to you minutes ago before we hop on stage, when I said to you, no, it took me 30 years to realize what's going on.
Yes,
I'm already old. Because it's
yes,
like the whole thing about, I explained that better, the whole thing about when you immigrant, you come somewhere and you try to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And then you try to fit in.
Yeah.
That's at least what I did.
Yeah.
Let me fit in. And then I realized maybe I shouldn't fit in. Maybe I should have my own voice.
Yes.
So, and then what is my voice? And then who are my audience? You know, how can I build my audience? So all of that starts just now. I'm already like, it's an interesting conflict that we have. I think that place I can speak for myself.
Yes. Yeah.
You know,
no, I feel the same way.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
I feel the same way.
And then like as a director, when I pitch my work, a lot of artistic guys will say, but that's not very American. I'll say, like what, you know, like where I come from and what my experience is, I want to combine with what I want to offer. But I think you did a great job having your voice in a way, right? Like,
I mean, and so did you, because like you really channeled a really specific path for your work. You know, like when we saw your shows, it was like, okay, that's a Taya show. You know what I mean? It's like explosive and weird and wonderful and like all of that kind of stuff. You know, I feel like I think for us, we also immigrated to New York. You know, we didn't really immigrate to like America or whatever that means. You know, and going back to what you said about like, oh, I just figured it out. You know, I mean, we're still constantly figuring it out. You know, it's just, I think part of. And I don't know if there's any other way, right? You just sort of, for me, I just buried my head in work and just kept on working. And there's a lot of like things that you kind of put on the shelf, you know, for that. And I know that one of the things that I'm doing now in my practice is really kind of unlearning a lot of what I learned in grad school and a lot of like the things that I was told, right? Because when I first immigrated here, I really just wanted to soak everything in, you know. We were young, you know, we were like in our early 20s when we immigrated in the 90s, and New York was different, but also for me at least, you know, I was just so ready to absorb what was coming to me, right? Like I'd be a sponge, and if that required me to put a lot of things about my identity on a shelf, then I will, right? But then, you know, then there are things that are undeniable, right? Like all of a sudden I was brown. You know, I come from a homogenous country where everybody looked the same, you know what I mean? And so here, all of a sudden I was brown, and I had to deal with what that meant. and also continue to make myself as open to whatever learnings I was, that was coming at me in college or in grad school and all that. And I've realized that like in the last maybe 12, 15 years, like those things start to, the things that I have put on the shelf, like I'm starting to notice them more falling off the shelf. I was more sort of numb because we were just constantly working on productions. But there were many identity things that felt like, oh shit, like I kind of have to deal with this right now, because it was sort of like an existential kind of thing, that it felt more urgent and more that I was denying something, by kind of ignoring it, you know what I mean? Like this thing, because and it manifested itself in ways where I was working on something and I didn't feel connected to it anymore. It felt automatic. It felt like it just felt clinical, and I started to kind of have a panic attack about like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why am I not feeling this thing that I used to feel about like work or the excitement of something new or anything like that? And I think I found that just like really by kind of imagining what it would be like to kind of like unlearn, the things that and by unlearning, I didn't mean like I'm gonna throw it all out or whatever I learned. I just like really wanted to sort of sift through who I was and my identity, my culture, and how that kind of, at least the theater that I practiced in my teens, in the Philippines, like, how that really made me into a theater artist who yearned for more things, and I think that was really important to me, like, and a lot of my practice now is informed with that, with that sort of frame of mind. I mean, we both teach too, or we both taught. We have a very complicated relationship with arts education here in America, and so I think I'm not going to speak for you. I have a very complicated, and so I think, and I think that sort of like also kind of like triggered that whole unlearning thing.
It's very interesting you're talking about that, because I think there is after COVID, there's this whole big question, right, of how we moving forward. Should we move forward in the same way? I think question came in academia, but I think also in theater itself, right? And at the same time, we all have quite a bit of time on our own, wherever we were, to kind of rethink everything. And I think I believe for myself, I think everybody had that moment of change. What now? But I would say for myself, even before COVID, I had a moment when I hit the wall. What you're talking about, I'm like, okay, so what stories I'm telling? What is the story that I also hide my identity a lot. That's what I realized you understand. And I really realized I was traumatized, and I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, totally. I think because we wanted to be. I mean, I wanted to be as blank as possible to people. And there were things about me physically that I could not be blank, right? And so you kind of just really, and I think that resulted in a lot of like, just like kind of crazy things that I did to myself before I entered the room. You know what I mean? Like, I always talk about like, and to this day, I had to go to a bathroom before I go to a meeting or whatever. And that started like in grad school when I had to like literally do these mouth exercises so I would get my English right. I would get my English right. I would center myself, and that's just a small part of the work that that an immigrant artist, or particularly even like a person of color who was also an immigrant, has to do before the real work happens. And so it's literally what you said.
That's exactly. That's interesting, because I realized that I look how I look, but and some people that I come from war, and I have big trauma because my country was devastated and my people were killed, and my father was in concentration camp and all that. So I come from a lot of trauma. So, but I look in a way that I can fit in, right? But I'm completely traumatized by the fact, am I fitting, or am I speaking in the right way? Is it English landing? So I'm self-conscious, right? And I think that's really interesting that also I'm same as you saying, like in a way, like how that comes in your work,
Yeah.
right? And then how comes representing who you are,
Yes.
and also how comes into what you like, how you want to move forward. Like my
Yeah.
question now
Yeah.
in our time, you know, when we were saying before and
Yeah.
now, like theater when we came to New York was different than
Yeah.
now. I'm wondering, like, what can we do now? Like, what do you think? Is it like a, I don't know, input that we can do, or
I don't know.
You don't know,
I
right?
mean,
don't
you
either.
kind of want to be hopeful, right,
Yeah.
about things, but like I think what we're seeing is there's this quote from this book by Antonio Gramsci. He was like this writer, Italian writer from I think the 1930s, and he wrote, you know, this book called The Prison Diaries, and he calls he labeled this like period between fascism and whatever and the war basically as an interregnum, right? And where he says that that the new cannot be born because the old is refusing to die. Right. And I find that so kind of like really powerful because I think this is the space that we're in right now.
I agree.
You know, that there's just so much power and energy that is being expended on the old not dying. And if you really look at that as a metaphor, you're kind of like in triage. You're in an ER. It's an industry in the ER, right? And that's highly stressful, and it's very it operates on this level of alertness that is not normal. It's not nurturing. It's important. It couldn't nurture because it's permanent. I mean, it's 24 hours triage, you know, and that's kind of like the way I feel right now. And there are pockets of joy, there are pockets of peace, and you know, all of that kind of stuff. But like I think as an industry, you see that it's the thing that you're like, oh right, that's the thing that needs to be changed. But there's so much energy being expended on holding on to it, you know, but everybody sees it, you know, and I think that's where the exhaustion comes from.
Yeah, I agree with that. I wanted to know, just a personal thing, like how do you move from design to producing?
It was hard. I had always wanted to. There came a point where I'd be like I would be in like these rooms, right? And as a designer, if you collaborate with the right people, then there's an openness. You know what I mean? And I'm lucky that I was able to collaborate with like directors who really were like there was an openness to it, right? But what I found is that artists really have very little agency over how the whole thing is presented, right? And it didn't make sense to me because in our countries, you know, artistic directors were also the producers, or you know, designers were also the producers, and even in this country, there was a history of creators, you know, being the producers of their own show, like Michael Bennett and all those people who basically like put their, you know, and so, but I'd never known how to do it, you know, and because there's no sort of roadmap to it, and in a large way, I think it's easier for America to kind of silo you into. We know these kinds of work, and that manifests itself from like, oh, you know, you're from this country and you can only do this, or you're queer and you can only do this, or boxes, this boxes, right? And I was just interested in, you know, and it took me a long time to see like, well, what would it be like if I actually produced? And you know, I yearned to produce in a different way. I want to.
You want to give more voice to artists.
Yes,
right?
but exactly, but also it's passion driven. It's like I feel very strongly about this and about this particular project, and I feel very strongly about how it's made, right, and who gets to make it. And I didn't know how else to do that. But also, I'm getting old, and I felt like I was running out of time, right? I'm so vocal about like meaningful representation in the American theater. But it didn't feel like I could move anything just by yelling. And so I was like, yeah, let me, as Will said, let me in the burning house. Right.
These are not nice jobs.
No,
But
they're
I
exhausting.
I
Yeah.
really love, it's a platform.
No.
that, like,
Correct.
I want to actually say that I did everything I possibly could to shift the system.
Correct.
So I'm gonna work here.
Right. Because you could either burn it down, right, or you work within the system. But you could also, I think, have a combination of both, right? Like there's just like, to me, like, like strategic, dynamite setting, I think, or whatever it is. But like and also we hear so much about like how in this industry, not only Broadway, not only commercial, but the whole American theater is broken. And as a designer and as a practitioner, and I don't know if it's a privilege, we were separated from that, right? We were separated from really diagnosing how broken it was. And I said, well, I want full access because I really want to diagnose how broken it is. I want to get under the hood and I want to see how broken this chassis is, right? Is it irreparable, or is it like, is there hope? Even if it's like a tiny bit of hope. So that's sort of
That's
that's how it is.
So how you producing the work? I mean, how that works?
Yeah, so I think it started with actually like folks like directors like Leah de Besnay, who was my who you know too, was has been a collaborator, and she said, listen, I'm taking over this program at City Center, and this was in 2019, and she was like, would you consider? I said, well, I've always wanted to produce, and I don't know if I want to run an institution, but there'll be like you, me, and Jenny Gersten, and I said, okay, cool, let's do it, and it kind of like transformed there, right? And I think the producing part of it became kind of organic. It moved organically from like really thinking about dream projects and dream collaborators and dream visionaries who would basically like, and also how do you make yourself an institution where people come to you with ideas, right? Oh, I want to do a version of La Cage that's this and that and that, and you really take that seriously. You know what I mean? Like you take it seriously and you say, okay, great. Then how can you make that? But I think, the progression of like that kind of producing to like finding money for that, to like do it. I produced Here Lies Love on Broadway, and really just like looking at how you do that as a cultural project, on top of it being a capitalist venture, all is rooted in this idea of like, how can we make something that an artist or a group of artists feel so passionately about, right? And whose values you actually share, and how do you make it happen in this broken system, and how do you kind of work around the system? Because really that's what it is, for me at least as a producer. I'm not an 800-pound gorilla like these producers, I have to find like ways around that particular system that is, broken.
And you're saying broken, right? It's like, I think we probably all have a different version of what that is, right? And I will be happy to hear what that means. Like, I can say for me, how I translate that is, I want to see more diversity in work.
Yes.
I want to see more voice of artists.
Yeah.
I have 2 students here who in my class will pitch incredible shows, and they will tell me, oh, but we don't see work like that outside as much.
Yes.
Like we only see certain kind of work.
Yeah.
And then we also, I think, what are we saying is that we want young people in the house, right? That's so is that what we're saying about, or there's a, I
think that, right? But also how literally like money flows through our industry. Right? Because even not-for-profits are basically kind of based on a capitalist system.
They are.
Right? They have a board and all that kind of stuff. And so so really it's like how do we do that, right? And it's a chicken or the egg thing. It's like if you have these few people controlling the industry financially, that also means that, to a certain extent, they're also controlling the aesthetics of that industry, right? And that's the aesthetics,
choices,
right? And that's the aesthetics that they're basically telling the public or the audience, like that is what is good. This is what is desirable, and this is what you ought to be you ought to be seeing, right? And so unless we kind of like expand that and start somewhere in that sort of chicken and egg cycle, then I don't know how else to disrupt it,
Yeah, I don't know it either, because that's a interesting question, because places we coming from, people write grants, and there is no private funding for any art. It's actually forbidden in Europe to make money off of art. It's just like oh, well, okay, that has pluses and minuses in another way, but I think like we're talking about having more platform to take more risks.
More risk, and really just like understand this idea of like what you feel so passionately about, what you feel so like, oh God, this story must be told, right? Really finding those same people who feel that way. I found, at least for me, is like the things that people give me money for are the things that I've actually found to be really passionate about. I cannot raise money for something I don't feel passionately about. Because people will actually give you the money, not the thing the money.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Sorry, we have a question, James. Sorry.
No, just in addition, I love all of this, and it makes me think also about the importance of having, even in institutions that can feel very capitalist in shape, having artists producing and administrating from a space of creative values. So like looking at budgeting as an artistic act, looking at missions as dramaturgy, and I actually think that is it's not going to fix it all, but is part of the healing of it as well, is producing and creating and administering from the same creative values that you have as an artist, rather than thinking of them as like siloed.
Yes.
And I think that probably speaks to what you're saying as well. The projects that you've been most successful funding are ones where it's your creative values are driving the producing impulse.
Precisely. I think that's literally what I think, to me, this is why I feel like I'm really excited when a lot of artists actually start to produce. And there's like a whole new wave of artists who are just like producing. Because it tempers those, it's also very informative, it tempers not only I would say expectations, but it actually tempers expectations as you create new paths, and that to me is crucial. It makes the dreaming more exciting, because then there is a path towards the dream,
That's true. What will be your message to somebody who's starting now?
Oh my God. I don't know. I was just like listening to the last panel, and I got so panicky because like I just realized like how much work it really requires.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it really is like, from the OPT to the O1 to the blah, 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 blah. And while we are sitting in a place of privilege because we've gone through that process, that's not without trauma. I mean, I just asking an employer to say, hey, can you actually do this through this way? You know what I mean? Through can you sign my, or even asking colleagues for letters and all that kind of stuff, that brought a lot of shame for me, right? Because it was just like, you were so different than the others. Like you required so much, these things. And I would say, get over that, because that didn't help me. You know what I mean? And really, if you can find a way to not feel so alone, that would be I would say that would be the best thing. Danai Gurira, who is also, did you go to school with her?
Who?
Danai Gurira? She came later.
Yeah.
But she says this thing, which I think is like my favorite thing. She says this. She's like, go where the love is.
That's true.
You don't knock on those doors that you feel like, yeah, you can dream. You know what I mean? But like, go where your people are, basically. people who share your values, who you don't have to explain your existence to, and work with those people, create with those people, you know, and you'll be surprised that there are a lot of those people actually in our industry, you know. I think that would be like my first thing to say to them, and also just it's just that my experience is so different. You know, we came up at a different time, right, where we didn't mind, like didn't mind, and then years later you're like, oh shit, I'm so traumatized. You know, where it was normalized to literally like be paid very little.
Yeah.
Try to figure out how to make, you know, ends meet with that. You know, like whether or not like that meant like you're going to Grace Papaya for dinner, you know, on a $2 deal or whatever it was, to be able to just really do that thing that fed your soul, you know. And that to me, at that point, I was young, I didn't mind, you know, because I was getting fed creatively. I was in the room and having these really meaningful conversations that to this day cemented a lot of the way I look at myself as a practitioner philosophically, right? Like it's like it formed me as human beings, but it didn't pay me money. It paid me some other way, right? I kept my overhead really low, you know, very, very low. Like I shared an apartment with like many people, you know. So funny. I just like look back at this thing. There was this, okay, so you will find these people, and I'm sure there's a version of this there if you just keep yourself open. But when I was going to grad school, and after grad school, there was this Chinese lady who married this really rich guy. And this Chinese lady would basically house Asian artists, right? She had this amazing like it was in the 103rd and West End. She had this amazing, like huge apartment that she would divvy up for a lot of like these, and we were paying like $300 a month, and that was, you know, that was like in the late 90s, so that was still, but like you will find people who are willing to do that for you, you know, and be creative about where you live and how you live. I think that's sort of like my advice, because, you know, the conversion rate might be different now, but there are still like ways where you literally, your rent matches like what you make, you know. I didn't pay attention to like, oh, this is how much you should be making if you want to live in New York City, because I never lived like that. I was I was a dog basically. But and then the other thing is like, and this I say because I did practice this, it's like, and I don't know if I had done this, if I would be where I was, but like I didn't take care of my mental health, right? But I also don't know if like if like my being crazy like really contributed to that kind of like drive. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't. All I'm saying to you is like there was some fucked up.
We're not questioning
right. Right. When we were going to grad school, there was no center for mental health in our schools. Right? Like you can't. There was no like you couldn't go to like fucking NYU or go to the mental health office. There was none of that. Like you had your community, you know, and you talked to your friends in grad school, and you were like, "Oh my God, that was so fucked up," you know what I mean? And whatever those little traumas are that happen in those settings. But a big thing that happened to me immigration wise is that I got in trouble. I got into.
Right, sorry. Once you left to Sweden, that's something
that's
else.
another thing.
Okay. Sorry.
I love that you fucking remember that.
I never brought it up.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Woo, Sweden. So when I was in grad school, you know, I was, again, like this goes to the mental health thing. I was doing so many drugs. Like I was like a fucking junkie. And also being in grad school and working in the American theater. And for some reason that all worked out. You know what I mean? Like everybody like, oh, Clint's high again or whatever. But you know, it was like fun when you look at it, but I got in trouble. I got in trouble because I got addicted to it, and I had to go to rehab and all this kind of stuff. All of that to say that my addiction got me in legal trouble. And when you get in legal trouble as an immigrant, forget about it, right? Forget about it. And so there was a period of time that I'm just like laying it out because like my life is an open book. There was a period of time that I was undocumented because they would not renew my O1. Right. It's like, oh, right, you had that like charge from the 90s. And for a long time, I had been able to renew, and then it caught up with me, right? And so they didn't renew it. And at that point in my career, I was already working. I was like working, like, I had worked with like high profile people. Like I was, anyway, like I was doing well. And they didn't renew my thing, my visa. And I said, I decided to stay. Because I said, I formed a life here, and whatever that mistake was when I was young, I had fixed that. I had done like whatever community service and all the whatever, you know what I mean? And I'm just gonna wait for the laws to change. The laws had not changed today. So I was undocumented for, and then in 2010, I was in tech for the revival of Angels in America with fucking Tony Kushner, not fucking Tony, with Tony Kushner, Michael Greif, and blah blah blah, and ICE took me. They took me and they detained me, and they were going to deport me. I was in detention for about 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, ooh, honey, yes, and so what I needed to do anyway, through like a lot of like legal maneuverings, and a lot of this is because of community, right? And I say this because I am so deeply grateful to the theater community, and this is partly why I don't give up on it, because our community is made up of exemplary human beings who literally are in the right side of justice, right? Because the immigration laws in this country are very punitive. They're draconian and punitive. It's really about punishing people, right? And so the community basically said, oh, no. That was, he made that mistake when he was young. That's a long time ago. Look at the life that he's led, or whatever. And at that point, I had been sober for like 13 years or whatever. But I had also like accumulated this much work, and like we really, and they did this like crazy ass petition. And I'm not saying that you should do drugs now, so you can like whatever. Like don't get in trouble. Which basically this is how punitive the immigration laws were. They had to erase that record that happened to me in the 90s. That was the only way, in order for everything to be antedated so that I would be in status. And that kind of like happened, right? Like that happened because of everybody called the governor. Like they called and they were like, hey, and up until then, I was like very secretive about what happened to me and my immigrant status and blah, 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 and my family, who I love and are like so dear in the Philippines, when I couldn't come home, they would take turns coming to New York for Christmas. I wouldn't be alone, right? So don't get in trouble. Not even jaywalking, because it's not even about a felony. A misdemeanor could get you in trouble, right? And if you're, and I particularly talk to my brown and black immigrant folks, a traffic violation could get you in so much trouble. You know what I mean? And so for me, this is what I mean about my experience is so specific in this way, deep with immigration, and also with like the American theater, that I feel like there's so much that this country
Wow. It's a play there.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Every single one of them had an accent. And you're like watching this unfold, you know, and you're in detention with these folks who are literally, who don't know any other home but America. My roommate in that detention was this 19-year-old Mexican boy. I call him a boy because Mexican boy who went to the LaGuardia Arts High School. And when he was 15, his girlfriend was 14, and the girlfriend was an American white woman. The parents charged him with statutory rape. Which made him a felon. Which made him, and he was undocumented. He was brought here by his parents when he was a baby. He didn't even speak Spanish. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden he's being deported to Mexico, a country he doesn't know. So all I'm saying is like, it is so important that yes, you know, we're talking about the arts and how to make it in the arts and all that kind of stuff, but that's also your other world. That is your world. That your foot is firmly planted in that world too. It's bananas.
Can I give you a hug?
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. Like I say this to a lot of, like, you know, like during COVID when there were a lot of like immigrant students, right, who were in limbo and were told to go home or whatever, and you know, and we organized and we created this space for lawyers to talk to them. That was one of the most important things, right? Like, as they were like not having any money, right? Because they're not, all of a sudden they're not working and they're not in school. So whatever funding they were getting from schools, you know, went dry. Now they were forced to take jobs when they weren't supposed to be working. But they had to, because otherwise, right? They had no health insurance, all of this kind of stuff. And so you make your own decisions, you know, about you really check where you are. And I'm not saying, you know, you should do this, you should do that. I'm not a legal person. If I were, I'd say don't work. You know what I mean? But you need to do what you need to do. You know, and that's what I did. I did what I needed to do. I said, I'm gonna stay undocumented until the laws change, but it hasn't changed. I'm just really fortunate that I belong in a community that supported me and figured that out. You know what I mean? Plus also a really, really smart immigration attorney. But yeah.
It's an amazing story. Wow, Clint, thank you for sharing.
Of
that
course.
with us.
I was like,
I didn't know that part.
Oh yeah.
Didn't know that part. So I wanted to ask you, home. Like, what is home? Artistic home versus physical home, or like, what's home after so many years? And how do you feel when you go back to a place where you were born?
Oh, I love going back to the Philippines now.
Yeah.
I didn't, you know, again, I carried a lot of shame, right? And I carried a lot of shame, not only about my identity, but also my home country. It's like, you know, it's like, how can this like country who has been through so many layers of colonization and war and genocide and all of that kind of stuff, and how can I, you know, I always, when I left, I always looked at it as an escape. Like, I'm gonna escape to America, like a lot of like Filipino immigrants, and because that country can't figure its shit out, right? I love going home now because, and I go home like 3 times a year. I produce projects there and here, and I love it because I think just being in America for so long and going through the immigration process and really just like learning about what America is, right? Like for me, I've developed a deep kind of love and compassion for my people and my country that I've never had. And it's not a compassion of like, oh, I feel sorry for what happened through the layers of trauma of like centuries of like, you know, white people trying to like fucking own the islands. But like, it's really about like, oh, right. Like the resilience of a people, like that is manifest. And to me, I love that because that runs through my veins, you know. But I also feel like home is like, because, you know, the home that I have, I carry it with me. Like you know, I have a husband, I have a daughter. That's home. Going to the Philippines is home. Being in a theater is home. All of that, you know, seeing familiar faces and you know people you love and work with, you know, like that's home. I think you just can't. It's impossible to have one home when you're, you know, when you're like us.
I think so. I think
Yeah.
it goes back and forth a lot,
Correct.
right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you're always in a constant dialogue with yourself,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I left during COVID. We left because I had a small child at the time, and we went to Europe, and I was there longer than I ever was in 27 years I have been here. And then after 6-7 months, I thought, New York is my home.
I feel the same way. I was gonna ask you, what was that like immigrating, like, you know, like because the war had literally just ended, right? Like,
Oh, it was terrible. My story is just
yeah.
It was. I was 19 years old, and I was hid in the car
Yeah.
and smuggled out while my parents stayed, and I didn't know if anybody's alive.
Jeez.
And I was refugee for about 4 or 5 years.
Right.
Yeah, living on the streets.
I was just thinking about that
Yeah.
when we were sitting there because I was like, oh my God, like it's literally the same thing that's happening right now.
Oh, it's happening right now.
America
Yeah,
sending
yeah.
bombs to a country.
Yeah, it's the same thing. And every time when war happens, like when it was Syria, I think I was just crumbling because I relive everything all over again. And when it's Ukraine, and now it's Israel and Gaza, I'm reliving, and I'm like, it's never going to stop.
Yeah.
And then I have this kind of inside fight. I watch or I don't, you know, it's like, should I follow? Should I
Yeah.
not follow? You know, and then I'm also a little bit like, I don't give my voice out because I'm completely traumatized.
I feel the same way, you know, nowadays, at least for me. You know, it reminded me of like, you know, all of these boyfriends that I had when I was here, and I would talk about America, right?
Yeah.
And every single one, it doesn't matter how like liberal and woke they would be like, why are you here? You seem to like hate this country so much, right? Right. Or not, you know, because and I think part of the problem was you know, it's not that I hate America. I actually love America. I love the ideals it set out for itself.
Ideal that it's set up. I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. and because to me, you know, that is the dream, right?
Yeah.
That is the dream. And I always like think about James Baldwin when he says that, you know, I love America so much, and it's precisely for this reason that I want to change it.
Yeah,
You know, and it makes me think about like, oh, how much of America Americans don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Very good question.
And it might actually transform their love into a more nuanced love of their country, right? Like or of this country, of our country, because I'm American. And I think about that a lot these days. You know, I think a lot about like, what does it really truly mean to be American?
I think about that too. And I remember when we had a long time ago phone call conversation about that, actually, when you were saying how we see our realities. I always remember that. I don't know why. You were saying that how we see our realities from not being born here, from ones who are born here.
Yeah.
Like how these different views we have. And it's interesting question about like when somebody asks you, because I had the similar, like, why are you here? You're so angry in the United States.
You will get that.
But I'm like, I also have to say that, you know, in my country, there was a genocide against Muslim people,
Yes,
and my father and I'm Muslim. However, living in Europe, I really have a lot of racial issues
Yes.
against me.
Yeah.
So I felt in the United States, at least, I mean, now it's going to sound terrible what I'm
Yeah, yeah,
saying.
no.
People don't know what happened. And I go,
Right.
"Ooh, good, I don't need to talk about it." Right. At the
Yeah.
time, and like people were like, "Where are you from?" I'll say Europe, and that will end. And I'm like, "Oh, don't need to talk about this genocide."
Yes.
And then I'm not being so like, like you will be at the party and things will look fine.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you don't
yeah.
wanna
And
talk.
especially, I think, it's funny that you talk about that because, like, at least in the late 90s, early aughts, like, everyone was like, oh, it's, there was this kind of like desirability to the Eastern European aesthetic as far as theater was concerned. Everybody was like, let's do it like the Eastern Europeans did it. And it's funny that, like, that you don't have to talk about that.
That was for me like a safe zone,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Like, and then now I'm like, I should have maybe, I don't know. I'm still struggling. It's because I don't want to go back to, that these traumas are hard. But that was I was only saying that was my reason to choose of United States.
No, yeah,
because
no,
it's a place where I actually can survive without
and not talk about it.
Not talk about it, not being targeted.
That's profound. Yeah.
Any questions we have?
We have two minutes.
Oh my God, we did it. We chatted. Because we were like, what are we fucking going to talk about?
I don't think anyone in this room wants this conversation to end. That Val is brings 2 minutes before the hour and 2 minutes before the half hour, so I happen to know it's super.
I love that. I love that. I love the voice of God.
Yes, the balance.
Yeah, y'all ask us a question or like whatever, Yeah.
So the question for me, I think I would like to ask is, do you ever feel like you compromise some sort of beliefs just so that you can just struggle to live the life you want, but you compromise it because you're like, this is a better door to go through? Because I hear what you say, that go with the people you love, you don't have to explain your existence, but what if there are these communities that you want to get into badly and you think if you get in there you can make a difference somehow, even if it's just for catered to white people, but you think if a brown person can get in there, you can make a change, but you have to sort of make these beliefs which you've created about your skin color and everything, and you just like, yeah, we can talk about those identities later, but right now let's just feed into the white dream bullshit just so that we can get the dream done.
Yes.
I just want to know.
Do I ever compromise? Yeah, every single moment. I think that's just the reality that I live in. The thing is that you actually, this is a really good question, because I think you are your only barometer to that, right? And you need to look at like, okay, this is a compromise here, but there might be a greater goal for change. I work with a lot of white people. I ended up working with a lot of white people, right? Because white folks and they at least on Broadway, like my first Broadway show, I was the only person of color. I was the only person of color.
And sorry, Clint, that was when? What year?
That was 2011 or something like that, or 9 or something like that. It was Elephant Man, and I was the only person of color there. But I knew that, I knew that if I found it to be like, oh, right, now I'm finally on Broadway. Like, this is a dream. I had to isolate that. I also had to like think like, okay, great. Then somebody, and this is really rote and like eye-rolly, but somebody's going to see my last name. My first name is very American, but my last name is not. Right, and they're gonna really think that, oh, right, I can see, because that happened to me. I every time I would go to a Broadway show, I would look at all of these names in the fucking playbill just to prove to myself that there was a place for me, because what I saw was different. What I saw was, that all evidence pointed to like there was no place for me. Right, and so I would find these weird names like Willa Kim, Eduardo Sicanco, all of those people like who literally were in these playbills, and I would make that proof to go on, right? To me, like this is how I can keep on going because I knew it can happen, right? and also there are, I would say, most, if not all, of my projects are really aligned with what I believe in the human condition, right? You will find that you will work on projects that on face value are not the things that you align with philosophically or whatever, right? But you know, if you get in there, you can actually shift a perspective. And that's worth doing. And most of the time, I was lucky that I had collaborators who would go in, like, we did this thing. We did the fucking first live show of Frozen. Okay, Frozen, the Disney theme. And this was a while ago. This was like in 2014. I forget when the movie, I think it was quickly happened, it quickly happened after the movie. And it was a director of color who I work with a lot, and me, and a music director of color, and we somehow found ourselves with this job. And then the thing was like, are you going to do it, right? Are you going to do this like thing for Disney, and does this align with your values and whatever? Setting aside the excitement that, oh, holy shit, we're going to do this Disney show, right? It was, to me, what was more exciting was what could we do to rattle the cages inside? And that's literally what we did. We pushed that institution to the point where that was actually the template for how they're doing Frozen right now with like an interracial cast. We had to like talk to Disney about why Anna could be Asian and Elsa could be Black, because they had 6 in the park where we did it in Anaheim. There were 6 rotating casts because they would perform it 6 times a day. And so we were able to match at any given time, a little girl of color would see themselves there as one of the princesses. And that to me was like, yeah, I did Frozen, but you don't know why we did Frozen. You know what I mean? So compromises exist every single day. But I think how you live with it is if you keep your eye on the prize, because the prize could be bigger than that present compromise that you're doing.
Thank you. Anything else?
Anything else?
We good?
Amazing. You said it perfect place.
It was a lovely place to end. I just want to thank you both again for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Thank you.
Just to say again to you folks, thank you for joining us today. We have a show tonight at 7. We have a show tomorrow at 3. The wonderful Makira Kakar performs an incredible piece. And then after the show on Sunday, we have a potluck, and we're going to honor some of our microgrant winners that are a part of this festival. So you're welcome to join us for that. All the programming is free. And thank you again for being at Rattlestick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
We're gonna go celebrate with Kassan's birthday.
I have to take you to dinner.
I know.
You know, the whole
I have to go.
Yeah.